Hello there, I'm another Magento dev. A warm welcome to this video. Today we're going to look at upgrading or updating modules, custom modules. So upgrading the data, sort of doing a bit of work around it as well. So it's basically, this is a real life job, a real life example that I've been assigned, and I've moved it to my test store, but I'm going to replicate what I did. So what we're going to look at first is we're going to look at the difference between installing data and updating or upgrading data, and the process, and also sort of building on that process to make a few changes to the module as well, because obviously in real life it's not as simple as just running an update script. There's all sorts of things to deal with. So in this example, what's happened is what's happening is there is a module on the site that adds a field to the account sign up, so the create new customer account, and it's this one to say whether they're a trade professional or not as they sign up, right? So this is what was already there, and that was the original installed data, was this trade account field, which was a boolean, and it just was a yes or no. It's saving to the account, but the client's come back and said, right, we want another field. We want where did you hear about us field with some options. So it's going to be a drop down with multiple options. So basically we've picked this up, this module, and now we're going, right, well, what improvements can we make? And I'm already seeing a few things here. Like, for example, this field, the original field, because it was nice and simple, because it was a boolean, look, the values are hard coded, set to 0 and 1. The options are hard coded, yes and no. Now there is a way you can get these programmatically using a block and show them, which is going to be useful when creating a drop down field, because the way the values work versus the actual text means that it's risky hard coding that in, and I'm going to come to that. But right, let's start from the beginning. What would we do first to sort of, first of all, upgrade the module, so, and add some more data? So the first thing I'm going to need to do before I can do anything else really is that I'm going to need to write an upgrade data PHP script, and basically the principle is the install data happens when the tell you what, I'll bring up my databases, happens when the module is first installed, and then it doesn't run again. Well, unless obviously you remove it from the setup module table, which I've done before. You can do so, sort of a little cheat really, rather than writing two scripts. If this was a brand new module, this is probably how I would do it. So I think I've mentioned this before, but this setup module table in your in a database, I've gone to a different site here, but I'm sure it doesn't matter actually. Sorry, setup. Oh, it's there, isn't it? Setup module. If I look at the data, it's all the versions and schema versions of your different modules that are on your site. Now, the schema version is different to the data version. Today we're dealing with the data version, not the schema. So we're inserting actual data into the EAV table. So basically, if I was to wanted to run the installed data script again, I'd have to say it was for one of these, like if it was that one, I'd delete it, run it again, and it'd add it back to this table, and at that point where it doesn't find it in this table, doesn't find a reference to this module, it would run the that script again. It would run the install data script again. But we don't want to do that either, because obviously, as I said, I could do that locally, that'd be great, but what happens when I want to push this live? If I want to push this to my server, I don't want to be making that change to the database before I do my commit on my push to the server. So this is where, as I've sort of mentioned earlier, this is where an upgrade data script comes in. So this type of upgrade data, I've done it wrong. So upgrade, as always, upgrade data is slightly different to install data, only in sort of the syntax, if you like, or the you know what's actually what you actually reference and implement as a class. So we've got a bit of boilerplate here, but we probably don't need any of it. So UpgradeData implements, and I won't type all this out. I'm just going to type out the best bits, the highlights, and basically, because I'm going to copy it off another one just to show you, save the typing. So it basically implements the UpgradeData interface, and InstallData is InstallData interface. They're the main differences, to be honest, in terms of the class and what have you. So I always use basically the same. Almost the same template each time, and I could put this up on GitHub for your reference. And like I say, I rarely change this. I use the same code basically every time. So I'm just going to paste it from this other one that I've done. So you need a constructor, and these are the things you need in the constructor. I believe this is on the Magento docs somewhere, or it's definitely if you search for it in a search engine, it's out there in. There's a number of like written tutorials with regards to what you include here. Obviously this tutorial is for 246 and it definitely works on 246, so you can be sure this one, by following this as opposed to maybe an older blog, guarantee this one's going to work. And also it's going to work for a select option, which to be honest I haven't searched for it for a while, because as I say, I've got loads of other sites, loads of other references, so I use my own references, but I'm sure it's one of those ones that in the written tutorials you're probably going to find a way to add booleans, text fields, things like that. So if you want something a little bit more advanced like this select field, this is the video for you. Right then, so now we need an upgrade public function. So we've got our constructor and we've got all the bits that we're going to use in our function, and this is the upgrade public function. So we're going to upgrade and we're going to utilize the module data setup interface here and the context as well, the context interface. So as I say, this is the same every time pretty much, and then you always start the routine off with start setup, and you also then finish it with end setup. So I will bang them in first, just the way I do, just to make sure I don't forget anything, and then I also have kind of a boilerplate for actually setting up the customer entity. So I'm gonna bang all this in now. So the next thing you want to do is create setup. As I say, it's always the same, but I think it's a good idea to walk through it. And then I reference the attribute set ID and the attribute group ID, which is, these are key for the customer entity, but there is versions of this. Obviously there's an attribute set ID if you're utilizing these scripts and repurposing it for a product EAV attribute, but these basically dictate the the group and the set for, in my case here, look, customer. If you were doing product, this would be product. If you was doing product here, this would be product as well, rather than customer. Now I'm going for customer on this tutorial, so the references are obviously just need to be changed and adapted to other entity types, but it's basically the same. So I'm going to get through this now because I want to get to some key things in here, so I'm just going to paste this in. So obviously this is as an exclusive one that you would use for an exclusive EAV setup script, that you would use for something like a where did you hear autos, where you select options basically. And I've got my options down here, and I've hard coded in my options here for ease, but obviously you could store these somewhere else if you really had to. I'm trying to think where you would store them now, and I'm not really coming up with anything, but basically this is where this is the best place to have your options, because if you did need to add other options, you would be able to write another upgrade script to be able to do it. So up to now we're looking good, and I'm just going to add in the final few lines. which are here, which are setting the data for the group, attribute ID, which is where I was getting it sort of from there. The default one, look, default attribute set, that's what I'm adding it to, and the default attribute group is what I'm adding it to. I'm calling it head about us. So head about us, this is what it's going to be called when it hits the database. So this is like the key, so it needs to be in kind of slug form or whatever you would call that with underscores. And then see, I keep this in and I keep it commented out because I always need reminding of this. But this basically is how it's how I reference where I want this field to show on the front end, because you set the data like this, watch. So basically this is where I choose used in forms, and then I choose the forms. So I'm going to say I want it in the admin, I want it on the create, and I want it on the account edit screen. And obviously you can add it to address, register address. There's other places, checkout, customer. I'm just sort of leaving them in there. I leave them in there for reference. But usually it's these three for something like this. Okay, and then finally we need to save the attribute. So all along here, just so you know, we've referred to the attribute. We're storing everything, we're setting all the data on this variable. We're finally setting the data there, where it's going to appear, and then we're passing that data into this attribute resource save, which is the attribute resource. And that's going to do the job basically. That's all you need in terms of its structure in your upgrade script, apart from, so cliffhanger there, wasn't it? Apart from the next bit, because and the reason I haven't put it in yet is because I'm going to explain. So when you create a module, you create a version number, like a setup version number, and when that hits the database, that's what's stored in. If I just jump back to this, and I'll jump to the right database this time. Which one was it? M246. And we're looking setup module. I need to just zoom in on this actually. You can see, look, these are all the modules on this sort of test store I've got. It's at volume 1, right, or version 1 of, particularly the data version is version 1. This is the module that I'm working in, and generally you install a brand new module, it's version 1, right? So we need this upgrade script to run. So we've got to change the version of this module for it to understand that it needs to run upgrade, that it needs to run an upgrade on the module. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to run. So how do we do that? Well, there's a handy bit of code that, again, always used. And I'm just going to paste it in again. So this basically picks up, so you have it in between your setup scripts. So this picks up the version that you want to run this from, right? So this is going to check for the version. So it goes right up to the end there. And it's only going to run it if it finds this version. Okay? So we're going to save that. And then, yep, you've guessed it, we need to change the module version. I'm not going to change it to 102. Obviously, it could be 101. It could be anything, as long as it's a different, higher version. And then this basically is going to run our upgrade script. Without this, it just ain't going to run. It just ain't going to run without telling it. It's just going to bypass everything. So we're going to run this now. And how do you run it? How do you get this to all sort of kick in? Well, you run setup upgrade essentially, and in my test store here, that means I'm going to run the big four. So I'm going to run setup upgrade, di compile. I can't remember if I've got Elasticsearch on. I always do this before I start recording. I always forget to turn on Elasticsearch. It's going to kick off if it's not switched on. What I'll do is I'll just pause this here and let this run through. Okay, so while this is running through, what happens if you want a sneak peek to make sure that your upgrade script has worked before you can refresh the front end? Because I would rather leave that running. There we go. Refresh your old module, look, and it's definitely picked up version 2. What else can you do to make sure it's installed the the actual variable, the EAV variable? You could search for it, see if you get hit. Yeah, so I've actually added, before it's all come back, I've now added this attribute into, it's got all the information that I asked for, into the database, and it's actually added it into the EAV attribute table, which is where they're all stored. So I know that that's worked, and now it's a case of just waiting for my store to deploy. So I'm just, my big four runs: setup, upgrade, di compile, static content deploy, and then it refreshes the cache. So what I'm going to be able to see now as I refresh the front end, hopefully, actually I'm not. It's not going to show me nothing because I ain't bringing it out to the front end, which brings me on to my next part of this tutorial. So well done on getting this far. Okay, so we're happy with the updated version. Now we don't need to update the version anymore. Now we're going to make changes to the actual front end code and stuff. I mean, you could, but for me you don't need to, because it's just gonna, we're not going to upgrade any more data. We're done with that bit. We don't need setup upgrade to do any more. Everything that's going to happen from now is going to be essentially static content, so you don't need to do another upper version. It is the setup version that we was talking about there. Look, setup version. Everything else is sort of your own decision, basically. If you wanted to upgrade it and then mark it as being upgraded, then I can't see any problem with that, but I just won't bother. Okay, so we're going to close some of these things. And so how can we improve this extension? Remember, we've picked up someone else's stuff, someone else coded it, you want to make some changes. And I've come across this, and it was probably me that wrote it, and I've just cut some corners. But now I'm utilising utilising a drop-down. Immediately I'm thinking I'm going to get some problems if I try and hard code in a select. So say for example I wanted to add in another field. You might think the simplest way to do it would be to add it again and call it about us, and then where did you hear about us? And then you could, or you'd be forgiven for thinking that's similar to your Boolean. You just need to put in the options that you specified in your upgrade script, right? And just replicate them on the front end. Well, no, that ain't going to work, because when this hits the database, the actual options are created with their own entity IDs. And I can show you one. So if we just look at, if we just search for, say, this one, which is quite unique sounding. We'll just come back here, just do a quick search for this. It's going to find a hit. And you see it's got its own option ID and value, and that's the value, look. So this is what we need on the front end, and rather than tracking all these down and hard coding them in, like this would have been the value of this, because a yes and a no is very simple. It's 0 and 1. It's binary, whereas this is multiple select. So we need to be a bit cleverer. And the way to be a bit cleverer is to programmatically get the information for our attribute from a block, and then show it in this PHTML. So what do we need to do that? Well, we need to be aware of something in this file. We may need to change this class, or we do need to change this class. So we'll keep that open. But first thing we're going to do is we're just going to add a block folder. And then inside our block, we're going to add a PHP file for getting the details of. Now, we're going to get the details. We're going to make both fields programmatic. So we're going to call it fields PHP. Right, and we're going to make both fields programmatic, because I said we wanted to make improvements. So we're not going to leave this one hard coded. We're going to write a function for both of them, and this is how we would go about it. So we've got our fields PHP. So now, actually, before I do anything else, I'm just going to change the reference in here, because this is kind of like saying just the template. This is the default Magento framework view, which is essentially not connected to any block. You could think of it like that. So this is going to change to, did I say fields? Yeah, fields. So now we're going to be passing the information from fields into our additional. So we can pick it up using block. So we can pick it up programmatically. But we've got to write our fields, we've got to write our functions here. So my Magento wizard extension in VS Code, search for it, it's a good one. As obviously give me some structure, give me some boilerplate code. Right. So what I need to do here is I need to go to the database and the EAV model, and I need to bring back the actual fields that I've added and all of the information in them, because I want to pull through the value, I want to pull through you know, everything that I need to basically programmatically show the select options. So I think I've got everything in there, and then in my constructor I need to add in my config that I've added up here. So in my constructor, so I've got context, I've got config, I've got data, and then I also need to reference in my sort of constructor, I need to then reference the config variable, and now I can use it in a function. So the first one we're going to write is the simplest one. It's just going to get the to be honest, they're both very similar. To be honest, there's just a little bit of an edit, a little bit of extra functionality on the multi-select. So the first one we're going to write is the boolean. So we need a public function because we're going to show it in the block, and we're going to call it get what was it, trade options, which was like a yes or no to say whether they're a trade professional. So we can call it anything basically, but just something that makes sense. And then we're just going to assign a array to options, so that sets it, not like that. And then in the next thing we're going to do is go get the attribute code. So we're going to have a variable again called attribute, because that makes sense, because we're going to go to the database and get it. So there's the attribute, and then I'm going to copy this in. So we're then going to reference our config, EAV config, and we're going to get the attribute, and then inside of this we are going to reference the customer entity. And I mentioned this, I think it might have even been on my last video. This is going to go and get the actual model for it. So I could reference just customer in here, but for whatever reason, in case that ever changes in the database, but I mean, you know, Magento Upgrade might change the wording of any of these things that you reference, any of the entities. It's worth utilising this type of logic to go and get it. I think actually, as a callback to my other video, no, I ain't got it on this one, but I basically did this in another video, but I'll cut that bit. Right, and so that's referencing the actual customer entity, and then I can get from the customer entity my trade variable. And my trade variable, again, similar to, like, you can check it in the database. Obviously, I know what I've called it in the upgrade script, but if I just search for trade, it's going to come up with an EAV. Obviously, the word comes up everywhere, but in more places. But that's my attribute code there. So I know, you know, it was added a while back. This is what I'm referencing here, trade. Okay, and then after that, after I've got that trade attribute, hang on a minute, what have I done here? There we go. Oh, didn't notice that. So don't do that. Trade. There we go. And then obviously I need to terminate that line. And then I'm going to check it exists. So I'm going to say if, because it's always good practice to do that. it'll save you headaches debugging stuff when you don't know what you've done wrong. Like for example, if you ever remove that attribute using an upgrade script and then didn't update your function or remove your function, you're not going to get any errors. Basically, if it can't find it, it's just gonna not basically do. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to run further. So I'll check it exists, and then if it exists, it uses source. And then I'm going to get the options from it, which I'm going to paste in. I can't bother typing. So yeah, so I'm getting the options from my attribute, but I'm just checking everything exists first. And then I'm going to return those options. Right then, and in the spirit of checking my work as I go, I'm going to make sure this works in my additional PHTML before I write the other function, before I go any further. So in order to do that, I need to first of all get it in here. So I need to check it exists. So next thing I need to do is check that that function exists. So I'm going to say if, and then it was from the block, and then it was called get trade options. Get trade options, and then because obviously if it doesn't, or there's, you know, if it's returning nothing, then you just want to return nothing. So and then we'll just end that. So it's only going to show this entire field if the trade options exist. And then to change it, we just need to change this bit basically. And now it becomes a for each. And we're going to connect to the block. Get trade options, it was called, yeah. As, let's say, option. To bring out each option. I won't do it like that. It's going to be easier to see if I do it this way. Okay, and then yeah, so the standard drop down options, just line all this up. Each one needs a value, and the value is in and it's always a good idea to write it like this. And then in the option, we've got a value. Nope, don't need the arrow. So that should bring out the value for the option, and then we can actually, hang on, we can close this, and then end, let's say close the option. We're going to put the label in here. So then again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, stick this in here. And then yeah, it's the label what we need, and I'm going to show you how we can find out how I know that in a way, because obviously I know that, but how can you find that out if you don't know? Well, there's a dead simple way, but first of all we'll just make sure this is working. So this should bring out basically the same thing again. What an idiot this guy is. Obviously it's a simple mistake now. I'm looking at it in edit. I've missed out the echo from on line 15 and also obviously on line 14, there should be an echo in between PHP $block. Yeah, the way I fix it is slightly different, where I just remove basically the PHP tags and have an equals, which is like basically saying the same thing, but with hindsight, obviously seems like a daft mistake. However, the reason I've sort of left this bit in is because the bit I'm getting to whilst I'm talking over this is quite a useful way of debugging these types of things as well, which I needed to do to debug because I couldn't see what I'd done wrong. So I'm just gonna, as I say, ramble over this bit. You'll see the next bit and everything will be okay. I know what I've done. There we go. Now it's showing. I just had a typo in there. So now these are programmatic, and obviously that's just a styling thing, but that's how you would check if you know what you can do. This should render those variables. There we go. So you can put them in a little pre, and it just gives you it just make sure you're getting the right information, and you call in the right, or you reference in the right keys. It's handy. So we'll just get rid of that now. Actually, we might need it for the other one. So we'll just keep the pre tags just sitting about just in case. Right. So the other one. We need another function, and it's the head about us options function, and it's a longer one, so I'm going to paste it in and then I'm going to talk through it. So as usual, this is one I've done earlier. Okay, if we just jump back into fields, and then it's essentially just another public function. However, right, I've commented it up as well, so I know what to mention to you guys. So as usual, we're resetting the array, or we're setting the array's options. We're going and getting the attribute exactly the same as before, except we're referencing our new attribute, and then we're checking if the options exist, all the same again. However, right, on a and this is the extra bit. So in a multi-select array, you want the first value ideally to be called please select. And for some reason I found, and it doesn't happen every time, but I check for it. So when I add one of these, or when I did it over on the Rails site that I was working on, the first entity, the first object was blank, which was annoying. But it's blank because, you know, what happens if someone doesn't want to save something? I mean, in this, you know, for a select field, but in this situation it was required, so they're going to have to. The front end's going to dictate that. But just all in that instance where there's a blank one, I'm just basically removing it and then adding my own in there, blank value, but the label was also blank before, and I'm adding a please select in as the label. So basically the first field that I'm going to get programmatically before it even goes to the PHTML file is going to have please select in it. So it means that you don't have to hard code it on the, you know, you don't have to add an extra option in here saying please select, and obviously it just keeps your code slightly tidier, I suppose. But anyway, that's just a little thing I noticed, which if you guys run into it, it'd be handy to know. So I'm going to paste this code in because I've been a bit of a while doing this, and here we go. So this is the code that basically brings through a select. It's again the same as up here, the for each, but this time it's just going to bring out more drop downs. Even though this was Boolean, it's still a drop down, so we're basically just using the same again. If I just save that, so we're checking for it, and then we'll just save that, and now we should get a fully working field. There we go. First one is please select, and everything else is exactly how we sort of expected it. So if I was to fill out this, let's just put some dummy data in there. yeah, just make sure it's saving to the account. If you've made a mistake, yeah, it will work, but this one is. So there we go, we've got a new account. And if I look in the back end, I should see the fields are filled out, been passed to the admin. I've got customers, all customers, and then there we go, there I am. Account information, there we go. So I selected yes for trade account, and recommendation was how I had. And that's it really. That's it for this one. So yeah, we covered a good couple of things. First half of the video was how to run the upgrade and best practices in that, and the second half was just a little bit of insight into, you know, I don't know, making a different type of UI from an existing module, and tidying up maybe something that's been done previously that you can always improve upon. So that's that. So thanks for watching, and if you like this type of content, this type of Magento content, please subscribe to the channel, because there's plenty more, and also please like this video because that helps my channel a lot. And I will no doubt see you in the next one.